There was something unspoken in the air of Dorsey Hollow, a heavy silence that weighed even heavier in the mornings, just before the sun rose behind the hills and lit the rusted spine of the old railway. Everyone in town knew, though no one ever said it. When a child turned 18, they left. They always left, and they were never seen again. The first to go was Henry Locke in 1884. Then Alice Whitmore in 1897. Then a dozen others, always on their 18th birthday, always without a word of goodbye, no packed bags, no visible fear. They simply vanished. Jonah Whitmore, Clara's brother, had vanished 2 years ago. The day he turned 18, he went to sleep in his bed, and by dawn he was gone. No signs of struggle, no footprints, no note. Except 3 weeks later a letter had arrived. It was addressed to Clara, written in Jonah's looping hand. "I see everything now, Clara. It's not what they told us. I can't come back, but you mustn't forget. They're waiting. Don't follow the tracks. Don't listen when the whistle calls. The hollow hides the truth, and the train never stopped running." Clara had read it 1,000 times, memorized the curves of each letter. Her parents never spoke of Jonah after that. Neither did anyone else in town. His name became a ghost, his absence a shadow cast across every moment of her life. Now 17 and turning 18 in less than a year, Clara felt the breath of something cold at her neck every night she tried to sleep. Dorsey Hollow was small, its people tight-lipped, its secrets deeper than the mines that once scarred the hillsides. The train hadn't run in decades, yet Clara still heard it, that faint whistle far off in the woods, only ever at night. She never dared ask the others if they heard it too. She had tried once to talk to Old Man Fletcher, the town's unofficial historian, who drank too much and talked too little. She asked what had happened to Jonah. His eyes glazed over, and his mouth twitched like a fish pulled from water. All he said was, "She never stopped collecting, not since Martha laid the first rails." Who was she? Clara never found out. But that name, Martha, would return in whispers, scratched into desks at school, etched into the bark of trees. Martha Dorsey, founder of the town, owner of the old line, the matriarch who built everything and disappeared just like the rest. Clara kept a notebook hidden beneath her mattress. Inside it she recorded every name, every date, every rumor she could find. She mapped the railway from memory, from old sketches, from fragments of conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. And now she was ready, not to run, not to hide, but to find the truth. She would not disappear like Jonah. She would not become a whisper. Before we follow Clara into the shadows of Dorsey Hollow, do me one favor. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. This story twists deeper than the roots of the oaks that tower over that cursed rail line. You'll want to stay close. The wind moaned low that night as Clara slipped out of her window, her notebook clutched to her chest. She crept past the tool shed, over the frost-stiff grass, and toward the ridge where the tracks still lay like bones beneath the moonlight. At the edge of the trees she paused. A single note drifted through the dark, a train whistle, soft, mournful, impossible. The sound pulled at her. Her breath caught. No one had believed her when she said the train still ran. No one had listened when she repeated Jonah's words. But she would find out for herself what ran those tracksmen and who it came for, and maybe, just maybe, she could stop it. Dorsey Hollow was a place of polite smiles and quiet doors. The townsfolk knew how to avoid questions. They had practiced for generations. Clara walked through its streets each day like a ghost among the living, her eyes open, her ears straining for the cracks in the silence. She had started asking questions carefully to people she thought might answer. Mrs. Elkins at the general store just smiled and said, "Your brother must have moved on, like young people do." Her voice was too even, her eyes too fixed. Clara asked if she remembered the others, Alice, Henry, May, Jonah. Mrs. Elkins frowned and said, "Never heard of them." But Clara had seen the photo on her wall, faded and curling, a group of teenagers standing by the schoolhouse. Jonah stood in the back, his arm slung over a girl's shoulder. May Fletcher. Her name was scratched into the desk Clara used in school. But now no one remembered May either. It wasn't just forgetfulness. It was something deliberate. Clara stood in the town library one morning, surrounded by dust and silence. The local records were thin, years missing, gaps in the census. Graduation lists that ended at age 17. It was as if Dorsey Hollow refused to acknowledge anyone past that age. In the back corner of the library, beneath a stack of hymnals and forgotten town ledgers, she found an old scrapbook, black leather, brittle pages. Inside were clippings of every Dorsey Hollow graduate, up until 1912. After that, blank pages. Except for one thing, a name written in the margin of the final entry. Martha remembers. Clara shivered. She closed the book, heart pounding. She took to walking the town in the early morning hours, before the streets came to life. That's when she began to notice the marks, scratches on the sides of buildings, carved symbols beneath porch rails, initials gouged into tree bark. Always the same looped figure, like a train winding into a spiral. It was old, older than the town itself. No one talked about those either. One afternoon, Clara approached Sheriff Calvin Ross outside his office. His face was lined like worn leather, eyes sunken, movements deliberate. She asked him about the missing. She kept her voice respectful, steady. He looked at her long and hard, then said, "That's not your concern, Clara." "But it's my brother." "There's nothing to find," he said, "and nothing to remember. People leave. They always have." She didn't believe him. His badge caught the sunlight, and for a moment she saw something behind his eyes, fatigue maybe, or guilt. The sheriff walked away, leaving her in the dust of the old wooden steps. That night she found her father in the garage, fixing the truck he never drove. She showed him Jonah's letter again, though she knew he'd seen it before. "I need to know what happened to him," she said. He didn't look at her. "Jonah left, Clara. You need to stop this." "But what about the others, everyone who left at 18? "There were no others," he said sharply. "You're imagining things." She wanted to scream. Instead, she turned and walked out. As the sun dipped low and shadows stretched over the hills, Clara sat at her window and watched the outline of the ridge beyond the town. The tracks were there, silent, swallowed by vines and time. But something moved beyond them. She thought she saw it, a flicker of light, the glint of metal, the haze of smoke. Then it was gone. She gripped her notebook tighter. The town wanted her to forget. It wanted her to be silent, to close her eyes, to grow old, never asking why. But she wouldn't. If they had all forgotten, then she would be the one who remembered. And memory, she knew now, was its own kind of defiance. The old Dorsey line hadn't carried a passenger in over 40 years, but its tracks still cut through the valley, like veins beneath skin. Clara followed them one grey morning, her boots crunching over gravel and frost, the wind carrying the faint scent of iron and rot. She had mapped this stretch dozens of times in her notebook, traced every bend, every trestle, every curve that faded into the woods. But this was the first time she walked it alone. About 2 miles from town, half buried beneath vines and blackberry bramble, she found the platform, Dorsey Station. Weathered wood, collapsing roof, no signs, no names, just silence. She stepped onto the platform. The boards creaked under her weight. The place felt abandoned by more than just people, like even time had turned away. Inside what was left of the station office, she found a rusted cabinet leaning sideways, drawers swollen from years of rain. One opened with effort, revealing a crumbling stack of ledgers and manifests. The ink had faded, but the names were still legible. Dozens, hundreds. All passengers, all one-way tickets, and every name, without exception, was marked with the same stamp, Final Departure. One entry caught her eye, Martha Dorsey, dated August 2nd, 1883. Martha Dorsey had founded the line. According to town law, she came from money, married into steel, and carved out her empire 1 mile of rail at a time. Her trains brought prosperity, growth, and silence. What no one talked about was what happened after she vanished. Clara took a folded page from the cabinet, pressed between 2 dusty schedules. It was a map, older than the ledgers, with strange symbols and notations written in red. It outlined the Dorsey line's original path, but with one difference. It extended past the known terminus, deeper into the woods, ending in a strange spiral where no town had ever stood. She stared at the spiral, the same shape carved into tree bark, the same symbol she'd seen behind the church scratched onto brick. This map predated the town's founding by at least a decade. Why would Martha build tracks to nowhere? Clara tucked the map into her coat. She looked back at the platform, at the rails swallowed by weeds and snow, and felt it again, that cold breath on her neck, the low thrum beneath her feet, like something vast stirring deep underground. When she returned to town, she passed 3 old men playing checkers outside the barber's. She paused, watching them quietly. "Used to be," one said without looking up. "The train brought folks in, then it started taking 'em away." The second man shook his head. "Ain't no train anymore." But the third, a man with skin like burnt parchment and eyes cloudy with age, whispered, "You hear the whistle yet, girl?" Clara didn't answer. Her pulse quickened. She kept walking. At home, she spread out the map and notes on her bed. Her mother knocked once, opened the door, saw the papers, and said nothing. Just stared. "Do you remember Jonah's birthday?" Clara asked. Her mother flinched, barely perceptible. "It's not safe to ask those things," she said softly. "You'll wake what's been sleeping." Clara stood. "What does that mean?" But her mother just closed the door. That night, Clara heard the whistle again, distant, mournful. She stepped onto her porch and looked toward the ridge. A light moved behind the trees, slow, steady, like a lantern swaying in time with footsteps. She couldn't see what carried it. She thought of the spiral, of Martha Dorsey's name on the ledger, of tracks that led into nowhere, into something forgotten or deliberately erased. The town wanted to pretend the Dorsey line had died, but it hadn't, not completely, and if it still ran, then someone, something, was keeping it alive. Clara sat at her desk, the old map of the Dorsey line unfolded before her, the red spiral glaring like a wound. She marked dates along the border, lining up names from school records, family Bibles, whispered stories. Every name of someone who vanished from Dorsey Hollow at the age of 18. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Every disappearance happened on the night of their birthday. It was a ritual, a rhythm the town obeyed without question. But why? She dug deeper into the town's archived newspaper reels. Most were incomplete, water-stained and faded. But buried in the 1904 column was a single line from a funeral notice. "We commend young Harold Crane to the Hollow's mercy. As the pact demands, we surrender him." The words struck like a hammer to glass. Surrender. Pact. She found more. Hints hidden between obituaries, old sermons, even recipe books passed down generations. Phrases like "bound by steel and smoke" and "her promise sealed in iron." They never named her, but Clara knew who they meant. Martha Dorsey, the founder of the line, the mother of the tracks, the woman whose trains brought prosperity. But at what cost? A passage in a forgotten church ledger confirmed her suspicions. It listed the offering of youth beside town events like harvest festivals and baptisms. The date, August 2nd, Martha's birthday. It was more than just train tickets and old rails. It was a pact, a deal struck long ago, and the price was the future. Clara remembered her mother's voice. "You'll wake what's been sleeping." Had Martha made a deal to protect the town? To keep it from ruin during hard times? If so, it hadn't ended with her death. The machinery she built, the Dorsey line, still functioned, still took what it was owed. And soon, Clara would be 18. She stared at the name etched into the platform's wall, one she hadn't noticed before. Her brother's Jonah Whitmore, 1938. Someone had carved it there after he vanished. She needed answers, and she needed them now. She packed her notebook and the map into her satchel and headed toward the church. If there were any official records, they'd be kept beneath the chapel, in the room no one ever used anymore. The air inside the church was thick, and the light through the stained glass windows felt dimmer than it should have been. Clara crept through the back hall, her heart pounding louder with every step. The door to the archives groaned as she opened it. Inside were boxes of ledgers, lists of names, collections of birth records. She thumbed through them until her fingers landed on a brittle page that made her breath hitch. Pact renewal. Witnessed by Sheriff G. Ross, Reverend W. Tilling, Ezekiel Crane. Her eyes widened. The sheriff? The current one's father or grandfather? Ezekiel Crane. The name stirred something. She didn't know him, but it sounded too familiar to be chance. The pact had been renewed, not just once, but regularly, always on the birthday, always by town leaders. They were all complicit. Suddenly the room felt colder. A soft knock echoed from the chapel above. Clara froze. Another knock. Louder this time. She grabbed the ledger and crept back out, slipping into the shadows and fleeing into the night. Back in her room, she stared out the window at the ridgeline, the moonlight barely touching the abandoned tracks. She felt them watching her now. Not just the town, but something older, something waiting beneath it. Jonah's letter came to her again. Don't follow the tracks. Don't listen when the whistle calls. But how could she not? Her time was running out, and if no one else would break the cycle, she would. The town had made its peace with the pact long ago. Clara would not. She would go to the station, and she would go on the night it came for her. The fog rolled in thick that night, swallowing Dorsey Hollow street by street. Lamps flickered and dimmed, casting long shadows that moved where no wind blew. Clara pulled her coat tight and slipped down the back stairs, the ledger hidden beneath her sweater. Her breath came short and sharp. She couldn't wait any longer. She made her way toward the old tracks, guided only by memory and instinct. The air was damp and heavy, muffling her steps. Every snap of a twig sounded like thunder. Behind her she thought she heard something, a rhythm slow and deliberate, like footsteps matching hers, beat for beat. She paused at the edge of the woods. The trees loomed above like sentinels, their trunks silver with mist. That's when she saw them. Figures, 3 of them, dressed in dark coats, hoods pulled low. Standing perfectly still between the trees, Clara's chest tightened. She took a step back. One of the figures turned slightly, revealing no face, only a glint of reflection where eyes should have been. The fog thickened, curling around them. She ran. Branches tore at her sleeves as she stumbled through the underbrush, the sound of pursuit growing louder. They weren't running, just walking, slowly. But no matter how far she pushed, they remained the same distance behind. She broke through the tree line, gasping, and found herself in front of the old bookstore, Crane's Rare and Forgotten. The bell above the door gave a shrill ring as she flung it open and slammed it shut behind her. The silence inside was absolute. Books lined the walls, stacked in leaning towers on every surface. The air smelled of dust and old paper, and behind the counter stood a man, tall, lean, his beard streaked with grey, his eyes sharp behind round glasses. "You've brought the hollow with you," he said, not looking up from the page he was marking. Clara caught her breath. "Who are you?" He finally met her gaze. "Name's Ezekiel Crane. You're Clara Whitmore." She froze. "How do you know that?" "I knew your brother," he said softly, "and I know the line doesn't let go easy." Clara stared at him. "You signed the ledger, the renewal." "That was my father," he said. "I never took the oath, but I inherited the truth." He gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then did. "You've seen them, haven't you?" he asked. "The ones in the fog," she whispered. "They come when someone's close to the rails," Ezekiel said. "They're not alive, not really, but they remember being." Clara pulled out the map, unfolded it on the table. "I found this at the station. There's a spiral out past the last mile." Ezekiel nodded. "That's the crossing." "What is it?" "No one knows. Only that Martha Dorsey built the line to reach it. She believed something waited there, something powerful, something old. She struck a deal with it, and in return the town prospered. But the price was youth, potential. Every soul taken at 18 fed whatever was waiting at the end. Clara's voice shook. "And everyone went along with it?" "At first they tried to resist, but the drought came, the fever, mines collapsed. Then the train took Harold Crane and the town flourished again. People stopped asking why." "But Jonah," she started. Ezekiel cut in. "He came to me before he disappeared. He wanted out. He was going to run. What happened? Ezekiel looked away. They caught him, took him to the tracks. After that, he wrote you. Clara's fists clenched. Can it be stopped? He met her eyes again. I believe it can, but you'll have to go deeper than anyone ever has, into the places even the Dorseys feared. Outside, the whistle blew, faint, distant, beckoning. Ezekiel stood. They've marked you now. You can't wait any longer. Ezekiel led Clara to the back of the shop, through a narrow hallway lined with cracked portraits and dusty shelves. The room at the end was locked with 3 bolts. He undid them without a word and pushed open the heavy wooden door. Inside, the air was colder, heavier. Boxes sat stacked on long tables, each marked with names and dates. Clara stepped closer, running her fingers over the faded labels: Locke, Elkins, Fletcher, Whitmore. These are the letters, Ezekiel said quietly. The ones that made it back. Not all do. Clara's heart hammered. From the ones who disappeared? He nodded. Most were found in mailboxes, no postage, no return address, just delivered, as if the hollow itself wanted someone to read them. She opened the first one on top, a letter dated 1911. The handwriting was shaky, frantic. I saw her. I saw the woman made of smoke. She stood beside the conductor and called my name. I thought it was a dream. But then the train stopped, and I boarded. Clara read another, then another. The others don't speak, but I know them. I knew their faces from school. We ride, endlessly. Sometimes we stop, but the doors never open. We are watched. It smells of ash. I wake each day to darkness. I forget my own name at times. But the sound of the whistle reminds me. I am still on the line. Each letter carried the same chill, the same sense of slow erasure. None of them asked for rescue. Most didn't sound like they believed rescue was possible. Finally, Clara found Jonah's letter, a second one, not the one she'd received at home, but this one older, brittle with time. If this reaches you, it means I still remember. But I don't know how long I'll last. The others are starting to fade, not just from memory, but from themselves. They become part of the train, parts of it. The conductor knows our names. He called me by mine before I ever stepped aboard. Clara, don't look into the light if it comes for you. It's not a light, it's her, and she's waiting for you too. Clara's throat tightened. Why didn't my parents tell me about this? Because most don't get to read these, Ezekiel said. They're buried, hidden, or burned. She looked up at him. Why keep them? Because memory is resistance. The hollow can't erase what we choose to hold on to. These letters, they're proof it's real, that they were real. Clara sat in silence, absorbing the voices of the lost. Jonah's words carved deep into her bones. They're still alive, she said. In a way, Ezekiel replied, but if the line breaks them too long, there won't be anything left to save. Clara stood. Then we have to reach them before that happens. Ezekiel hesitated. You're not ready yet. I don't have time to be ready. You have time to understand what you're up against, he said. The train doesn't just take bodies. It takes futures, possibilities. Every life it claims, every dream it consumes feeds the machine. That's how Martha kept the town safe, by starving everything else. Clara shook her head. I won't be fed to it, and neither will anyone else. Ezekiel pulled a thin envelope from beneath the stack. This one arrived just 2 days ago. No one turned 18 recently, not officially. Clara opened it with trembling fingers. The girl walks the edge of the rails. She's seen the gate. The hollow feels her now. If she steps further, there's no turning back. No name signed, but the message was clear. They know I'm coming, Clara said. And they're warning you, Ezekiel replied. Or luring you. Clara looked at the spiral on the map again. I don't care, she said. I'm going anyway. And in the silence that followed, she felt it again. The pull, faint but growing stronger. The train was waiting. Clara waited until midnight. The town slept under a veil of fog and silence, as if the hollow itself knew what she was planning. She left Ezekiel's shop with nothing but her notebook, the old map, and Jonah's second letter folded tightly in her pocket. The train came for those who waited. She wasn't going to wait. The tracks glistened like wet silver under the moonlight. Frost rimmed the metal. Her breath clouded in the air. Every sound, the crunch of leaves, the creak of branches, seemed too loud, too alive. But she kept moving deeper into the woods, past the station, past the point where maps ended. The whistle came again, low, distant, a sound that didn't travel through air but through bone. That's when she saw him, a figure standing in the middle of the tracks far ahead, too still to be natural. He wore a long black coat. A conductor's hat sat atop his head, perfectly angled. But there was no lantern, no face. Clara froze. The distance between them pulsed, shrinking and stretching like a heartbeat. She stepped forward. He didn't move. She stepped again, and then he raised his hand. The air changed. It was like walking through a membrane thick and cold. The world around her dimmed, even the stars above flickering like dying fireflies. The trees blurred. The wind dropped. Everything slowed. She blinked, and he was gone. But where he'd stood, the tracks had shifted. There were no more vines, no rust. The rails gleamed like new steel, and the gravel beneath her feet was clean, as if freshly laid. And then, from far off, she heard the churning of wheels. The train was coming. Not just any train. The train. It emerged from the woods without headlights, its engine vast and black, steam rising from its body like smoke from a funeral pyre. No markings, no number, just a whistle that keened like a scream buried beneath centuries of silence. She stepped back, heart racing, but the train didn't slow. It roared past her, its cars long and windowless. Yet inside each car she caught glimpses, faces pressed to the dark glass, pale, hollow-eyed, watching. She saw Jonah. His face appeared for only a second, but it was him. Older, thinner, but unmistakably Jonah. Clara screamed his name. The train screeched to a halt. The air split with the sound of brakes grinding against steel. The whistle blasted again, louder this time. The final car stopped directly in front of her. Its door opened with a groan, revealing a stairway into darkness. The conductor stood at the top. This time she saw his face, or rather, the lack of one. It was like looking into a tunnel, black, endless. And yet she felt its gaze pierce her. He extended a gloved hand, palm up. She didn't move. Behind him, a glow began to stir. Faint at first, then pulsing. Not light, not warmth, but hunger. The letter in her pocket seemed to burn against her chest. Don't look into the light. The conductor took a step down. She turned and ran. The whistle howled behind her. The ground trembled, trees bent. But she didn't stop until the light faded, and the sound of the engine was swallowed by the hollow again. When she collapsed onto the path, breath heaving, the forest was still. She wasn't alone. A figure stepped from the trees. Ezekiel. "I told you not to go alone," he said. "I saw Jonah," Clara gasped. "He's on the train. I saw him." Ezekiel didn't doubt her. "Then we don't have much time." Clara looked back toward the direction of the tracks. The conductor had seen her, known her. And he would come again. The next morning, Clara returned to the tracks with Ezekiel. The sun barely filtered through the trees, casting long bars of gold across the frost-bitten earth. The silence here was different, denser, like something held its breath beneath the soil. They followed the line deeper than she had ever dared alone, past the known trail, into the part marked on the old map. The spiral. The crossing. "What is this place?" Clara asked, voice hushed. Ezekiel pointed to the moss-covered stones near the base of the ridge. "This used to be part of a rail workers' camp, but no one's lived here in decades. And the records, they erased it, all of it. Yet the rails here were clean, polished, like something still moved along them, even if no one saw it." Clara crouched by the edge of the track. Her fingers brushed the metal. It thrummed. "You feel it," Ezekiel said. "The vibration?" She nodded. "It's alive." "Not alive," he said. "Occupied." A soft wind stirred through the trees, and then came the voices. They started as murmurs, faint and distant like conversation just out of reach. Then a name. Clara. She turned sharply. Nothing. Ezekiel tensed. They know we're listening. She pressed her hand to the track again. Another name drifted through the mist, Jonah, then others, May, Harold, Alice. She looked up at Ezekiel. They're in the rails. No, not in them, bound to them. Their names, their memories absorbed. The hollow doesn't just take people. It takes who they were. The wind picked up, and suddenly Clara could hear more than names. Laughter, crying, songs half sung. Moments torn from the lives once lived here, and all of them repeating, looping, like the train. There has to be a way to reach them, she said. Ezekiel gestured forward. There is. They pushed onward. The trees thinned near an old tunnel entrance, choked by ivy and stone. The arch above bore a rusted plate, Dorsey Line Terminal, East Spur, but the tunnel didn't lead anywhere known. This isn't on any current map, Clara said. No, Ezekiel replied, because it isn't supposed to be found. This is where they loaded the last offering during the war years. A whole group sent together. The town called it a tragedy, a freak accident on the rails. But no bodies were ever recovered. Clara stepped toward the tunnel. A sound echoed from within, metal dragging like wheels grinding against broken track, and then she heard singing, a child's voice, soft and low, a lullaby, familiar. That's my brother's, she whispered. He used to hum that. Ezekiel looked at her. Then he's still aware, still trying. The singing faded. Clara stepped away from the mouth of the tunnel. The rails here glowed faintly underfoot, like veins illuminated from within. They're not dead, she said. They're suspended. In between, Ezekiel agreed. Neither here nor gone. That's how the pact works. Their absence powers the presence of something else. The spiral symbol appeared again, carved into a boulder nearby, this time deeper, almost bleeding rust. Clara reached out to touch it and recoiled. It burned cold. Gate marker, Ezekiel explained. Beyond that symbol, the rules change. Time doesn't flow right. You'll start to forget things, who you are, why you came. The hollow will try to make you part of it. Then I need something to anchor me, Clara said. She pulled out Jonah's letter, held it in both hands. This is mine, my memory, my anchor. The voices in the wind quieted, as if listening, and then, like a whisper behind her thoughts, not yours, ours. Clara turned to Ezekiel. They're calling to me. And they'll keep calling, he said. Until you decide whether you're going in. She looked back at the tunnel. Somewhere inside her brother waited. So did the truth, and maybe the end of the line. They returned to Ezekiel's shop in silence. The map, the tunnel, the voices, all of it burned behind Clara's eyes. But something deeper gnawed at her now, a question more personal than any mystery the hollow held. Why was her name listed? Ezekiel retrieved a worn ledger from a locked cabinet beneath the stairs. Its spine was cracked, its pages yellowed and stiff. On the front, embossed faintly in gold, was a single word. Dorsey. This belonged to Martha herself, he said. Passed down, Sheriff Ross has a newer one, but this is the original. He opened to the middle. Names lined both pages, written in ink that hadn't faded. Clara leaned over, scanning the list. Every name matched a missing 18-year-old. Dates stretched back over half a century. She found Jonah, next to his name, taken 1938, and then, further down, her own. Clara Whitmore, scheduled 1940. Her hands trembled. They already chose me. They always do, Ezekiel said. The next one is marked years before their birthday, sometimes before they're even born. But why? Her voice cracked. It's not random, he said. The pact requires names to be given. Volunteers, the town calls them. But there's no volunteering. Just generations of silent offerings. It keeps the town untouched. Plagues miss us, floods avoid us. Our crops grow even when the land around withers. Clara backed away. My parents knew. Yes, Ezekiel said. They did. She staggered, fury rising. And they said nothing. Let Jonah go. "Let me—" "They didn't have a choice," he said. "No one in this town ever really does." Clara turned, storming out the shop and into the cold afternoon. The sky had turned an ugly grey, clouds swirling above the mountains. She headed straight for the sheriff's office, the ledger still in hand. Sheriff Ross was alone behind his desk, cleaning his pistol. He looked up, eyes narrowing. "You know," Clara said, holding up the book. His expression didn't change. "Where'd you get that?" "So it's true," she spat. "I've known all along," Ross set the pistol down. "It's not about knowing, it's about protecting." "You call this protection?" she snapped. "Sacrificing children? Hiding them? Letting people vanish without a word?" "Dorsey Hollow has survived longer than most towns in this part of the country," he said. "We've endured wars, disease, financial ruin. Other places dried up. We remained." "That isn't luck." "It's blood," she said. "That's what keeps this town going." He stood slowly. "You think you're the first to come here screaming for change? You're not. You'll break yourself against this, Clara, like Jonah did." Her heart froze. "You were there." "He tried to run," Ross said. "I stopped him. I delivered him." She surged forward, hands clenched. "You killed him." "No," Ross said. "I delivered him. There's a difference." "Is there?" He didn't answer. Clara turned, storming out, her breath ragged. The cold bit deeper than before. People passed her on the street and looked away, eyes fixed on the ground. Some knew, others chose not to. The Hollow thrived on silence. Back at Ezekiel's, she placed the ledger on the table. "This is proof, and it will get you hunted," he said. "That book isn't meant to be seen." "I don't care." He studied her. "Then we do this carefully. You can't just take the line down. You have to break its foundation. That means breaking the pact, not just the ceremony, but the belief behind it." "Then tell me how," she said. He pointed to the bottom of the last page, a final column. It read, "Witness required." "For the pact to hold," Ezekiel said, "someone must see it carried out. Every year, every name. That's the weak point." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Then I'll be the witness, but not to its continuation." She looked toward the horizon. "I'll witness its end." The map had shown only the surface. What Clara hadn't realized, what Ezekiel had suspected, was that beneath the rails, beneath the woods and the station ruins, lay something older. Older than Martha Dorsey. Older than the Hollow. They returned to the tunnel entrance before dawn. The mist hung low and heavy, curling around their feet as they descended into the dark. Clara carried a lantern. Ezekiel held a crowbar and a pouch of iron filings. "Why iron?" she asked. "It binds, wards off influence," he said. "Whatever's down here, it doesn't like to be touched." The tunnel sloped downward, farther than it should have gone. The air grew colder, drier. They passed decaying beams and rusted tracks, but then the passage changed. The walls were no longer brick or stone, but carved rock, smooth and glistening like glass. That's when they saw the carvings. Dozens of spirals, some small and etched into the floor, others massive, spanning entire walls, intertwined symbols, looping endlessly into each other. Ancient. Wrong. Clara paused. "These aren't Dorsey's." "No," Ezekiel whispered. "They were here before her. She just built over them." They pressed forward. The silence grew oppressive, like a pressure building behind their ears. And then, far ahead, light, faint, flickering, blue. They entered a chamber. It opened into a vast underground hall, larger than any church Clara had ever seen. Pillars of black stone rose toward a ceiling lost in darkness. In the center stood a platform, and on it, a train car. Old ornate, gleaming like it had been polished that morning. No dust, no rust, just waiting. Around it stood figures, cloaked, motionless, their faces hidden. Some held lanterns, others held books, and one, at the far end, stood taller than the rest. The conductor. Clara inhaled sharply. He wasn't just a man. Up close he radiated something inhuman, a gravity that bent thought itself. His coat shimmered like smoke. His hat bore a spiral etched in gold. He turned slowly. No face. But she felt the gaze all the same. "You are early," he said. The voice was layered, echoing through the walls and inside her mind. "I'm not part of your pact," she said, stepping forward. "Every soul in Dorsey Hollow is part of it," the conductor replied. "The blood remembers. The names are written." "I've seen the ledger," she said. "I know what this is." "A record of balance," he said. "Each taken keeps the hollow safe." "No," she said. "Each taken feeds you." He tilted his head. "Safety has a cost." Ezekiel dropped a handful of iron filings onto the ground. The air shimmered. The cloaked figures stepped back. Clara pressed on. "You built this beneath our feet. Beneath our homes. You've made our lives your harvest." "I am only the vessel," the conductor said. "She made the pact. She offered her line, her name, her blood. I am the result." "Then what happens if the blood breaks?" For the first time, the conductor hesitated. Clara held up Jonah's letter. He remembered, he resisted. That was never supposed to happen. The conductor's coat began to ripple. "He is mine." "No," she said. "He's my brother, and I'm taking him back." Behind the train car, a door opened. Wind rushed through the chamber, pulling at her coat, her hair, her mind. She heard screams and laughter, bells and wheels, the sound of steel on steel, and a voice, Jonah's, shouting her name. Clara stepped toward the car, ignoring the pain building behind her eyes. The conductor raised one hand. Ezekiel slammed the crowbar down beside the spiral on the floor. A crack spread across the stone. The cloaked figures shrieked. The conductor staggered. "You're not the hollow," Clara said. "You're what it buried." And then she ran toward the open door, into the heart of the train, into the unknown. The air inside the train burned cold. Clara stumbled through the threshold, the door slamming shut behind her. Darkness swallowed her whole, pierced only by thin strands of red light leaking from the seams of the walls. It wasn't a train. Not anymore. It was something else, shaped like memory, powered by absence. The corridor stretched impossibly long. The ceiling arched like a cathedral, but the walls pulsed like lungs. She pressed forward, her breath visible, her skin numb. The letter from Jonah crinkled in her fist, the ink smudged from her sweat. Then the voices began. At first, she thought they were in her mind. Fragments, regrets, laughter. But as she moved forward, they sharpened into words. "I didn't want to go," someone whispered. "I was chosen. No one looked for me." The walls glowed faintly, revealing outlines, shadows of people, pressed into the surface like fossils. Some reached out, some wept. Others just stared, mouths open in silent screams. Clara didn't stop. At the end of the corridor stood a doorway, this one rounded, rimmed with brass, glowing from within. She reached for the handle and pulled. The next chamber was circular, lined with benches. Seated on each one were passengers, dozens, all unmoving, all young. She recognized them, May Fletcher, Harold Crane, and Jonah. He sat at the far end, head bowed, eyes closed. His face was pale, thinner than she remembered, but unmistakable. Clara ran to him. "Jonah!" His eyes opened slowly. For a moment, nothing. Then, clarity. "Clara." She nodded, choking back tears. "I found you." He looked around, confusion clouding his features. Where are we?" "On the train," she said. "But we're getting out." He tried to stand. His body was weak, heavy, as if the seat held him down. "They won't let us," he said. "We're part of it now." "No," she said. "You remember me." "That's enough." The whistle sounded again, this time from inside the car. A sharp screech that rattled the walls. Jonah flinched. The other passengers stirred slightly, eyes flickering. Clara grabbed his hand. "You're leaving with me." The floor trembled. Flames licked the edges of the room. Smoke curled down from vents above. "They know," Jonah said. The conductor's voice filled the chamber, low, omnipresent. "This is not your domain. This is the debt of blood." Clara reached into her coat and pulled out the small iron relic she had taken from Ezekiel's shelf before they entered the tunnel. It was Martha Dorsey's relic, a pendant shaped like the spiral cracked down the middle. "I have your seal," she said. "And I break it." She hurled it to the floor. It shattered. The reaction was immediate. The walls shrieked. The train lurched violently. The faces in the corridor screamed. Flames surged. Passengers rose from their seats, blinking, remembering. Jonah gasped. "I see it all. At the moment I left. The faces, the hands pulling me through." Clara pulled him to his feet. The others followed, one by one, stumbling toward the exit. The air grew thick, the heat unbearable. But the door reopened. Outside, the chamber burned. Figures in cloaks ran. The conductor turned, his form unraveling, hat falling first, coat dissolving into ash, spiral markings flaring one last time before vanishing. Ezekiel appeared in the smoke, blood trailing from his forehead. "You did it," he said. "You shattered the relic." Clara led the group forward. "We're not done. We need to get out before the whole line collapses." The ground split. Pillars crumbled. The ceiling groaned. Behind her, Jonah gripped her arm. "I remember the way," he said. "I know where the breach is." Clara nodded. Together they ran. The hollow had taken so much, but now it was breaking open. And something long buried was finally bleeding. The tunnel shook with every step. Clara led the way, Jonah close behind, the rescued passengers staggering in silence, blinking through layers of memory, returning like broken glass, rearranging itself. The spiral carvings pulsed on the walls. Some bled light, others bled shadow. "Where does it go?" Jonah asked. "To the breach," she said. "Where the pact was sealed." Ezekiel limped beside them, one arm cradling his ribs. The line was never just a route. It's a ritual, built with intent. That intent has to be undone. They turned a corner. Before them stretched a final corridor of obsidian rail, arcing into the chamber they had only seen on the map. The crossing. It was a circular void, rail lines spiraling inward like a whirlpool. At the center stood an altar made of train parts. Gears, pistons, rusted wheels fused into a jagged throne. Above it hovered a glow. Not fire, not light, a shimmer, a pulse. And beneath it, a single rail car, perfectly intact. Clara stepped forward. The conductor's voice echoed again, fractured now, broken. "Return to your places. This is the way. This is the cost." "No," Clara said. "The cost ends now." The railcar's door opened. Inside, the walls glowed with the names of the lost. Hundreds, maybe thousands. One by one, they began to fade. Jonah's name flickered. He winced. "It's pulling again." Clara reached into her satchel, pulled out the ledger. She opened to the last page. "Witness required." She turned to Ezekiel. "You said this is the weak point." He nodded. "If no one witnesses the offering, it has no meaning. The ritual breaks." She looked at the others. "No one here will witness it. Not again." Jonah took a step forward. "Clara, look." On the walls of the chamber, shadows gathered. Not cloaked figures this time, but images, memories, children playing, laughter in classrooms, families, futures never lived. "They were stolen from time," Ezekiel whispered, "but not erased." Clara opened the ledger to her name. "Then I write a new entry." With Jonah steadying her, she took the pen and beneath her name wrote, "Refused." The spiral above the throne pulsed. A crack split the ceiling. The altar groaned, splintering under pressure. The conductor's voice bellowed one final command, "Board now!" "Or be consumed." "No," Clara said. "We ride for no one." She flung the ledger into the shimmer above the altar. It caught fire mid-air, brilliant, white-hot. As it burned, the railcar began to disintegrate. The names along its walls vanished. The altar collapsed inward. The spiral unraveled. The crossing began to fall. "Run!" Ezekiel shouted. The group fled as the chamber collapsed behind them, rail lines curling like snapped bones, the light swallowing the throne in a final scream of steam and metal. They surged up the corridor, the path quaking, walls splitting. The ground heaved. Just ahead, daylight, They burst from the tunnel mouth into the forest's edge, blinking under the grey sky. The wind rushed past them, warm for the first time in weeks. Clara fell to her knees. It was over. Jonah dropped beside her, hands trembling. "I thought I'd never breathe real air again." "You almost didn't," she said. Ezekiel stood, breathing hard. "The line's broken. The pact's done. It'll take time for the town to understand what's changed." Clara looked behind her. No spiral, no glow. Just trees and stone. The tunnel mouth had sealed itself. Jonah reached into his pocket, pulled out a torn piece of paper. It was a ticket. His name was on it. And underneath, cancelled. Clara smiled. The hollow no longer claimed its youth. The train no longer had a destination, and whatever had ruled the line was gone. The town of Dorsey Hollow awoke slowly, as if emerging from a long fever. The fog no longer clung to the rooftops. The tracks at the edge of town, once pulsing with hidden power, now sat rusted and still, covered in creeping moss. Clara stood at the edge of the woods, watching the path where the train had last appeared. Jonah stood beside her, holding the torn ticket like a relic. "They won't remember it all," he said. "Some of them never knew. Others chose to forget." "But they'll feel it," Clara replied, "like a weight lifted." Behind them, the rescued walked silently toward their homes, older siblings, children once vanished, names once erased. Some had no one left to return to. Others would knock on doors and be greeted with disbelief, but all of them had returned. Jonah shifted. "Do you think it's really over?" Before she could answer, a sound rippled through the trees. Not a whistle, not steel. A voice, calling her name. She turned. The air shimmered behind the ridge, right where the final spiral had been carved, and in that shimmer, faint and wavering, stood the conductor. No coat, no hat, just the outline of him. And yet, he was whole. He raised his hand. "Clara." The voice entered her thoughts, not through her ears, but through memory. "You broke the pact, but you haven't broken the root." She staggered. "I burned the ledger. I destroyed the altar." "The offering is undone," the voice said, but the line was never about sacrifice alone. It was about what she promised to gain. "Martha," Clara breathed. "She made the deal, and her deal endures unless it is refused at the source." Behind her, Jonah called her name. The shimmer was pulling her again, not physically, but emotionally. It showed her things, what Dorsey Hollow could become, the power, the protection, the legacy. If she just took the throne. "You're offering it to me," she said. "The last heir," the voice whispered. "The last Dorsey. You carry her name." "No, I don't." Blood remembers. The shimmer pulsed, revealing flashes. Martha's face, her voice, her signature on the pact. A child in her arms. A name whispered. "Whitmore." Clara staggered back. "No," she said again. "I'm not her legacy. I'm her ending." The ground beneath her trembled slightly. A choice hung in the air. The conductor's form stepped forward, less spectral now. "Almost human. You saw the truth. You faced the hollow. Take the line. Command the future." She stared at the shimmer. "I don't want control," she said. "I want freedom." The conductor tilted his head. His form cracked, spiraling into shadow. "Then you refuse?" "Yes," she whispered. "I refuse the throne. I refuse the pact. I refuse the name." The shimmer collapsed in on itself. The final echo of the hollow screamed as it folded into silence. The wind fell still. Behind her, Jonah exhaled sharply. "You let it go." Clara turned. Her legs trembled, but she remained standing. "No, I denied it. That's different." Ezekiel approached from the trees, bandaged and worn. "You said no to everything Martha ever built, and that was the real anchor." Clara looked out toward the valley. The rails would rust, the tunnel would collapse, but more importantly, the idea of Dorsey's legacy would fade. She looked to Jonah. "We weren't chosen," she said. "We were taken." He nodded. "Not anymore." Far in the distance, the wind picked up again, but this time it carried only leaves, no voices, no whistles. The hollow was quiet. For the first time in generations, truly quiet. The quiet didn't last. Clara barely had time to breathe before the ground began to tremble again, soft at first, then stronger, deeper. It wasn't the return of the train. It was something older. From the earth below came a groan, not metal, not steam, but stone fracturing, time itself shifting. "What is that?" Jonah asked, eyes wide. Ezekiel looked pale. "The track, the one beneath it all." "It's cracking." "The hollow's root," Clara guessed. He nodded. "The pact was only the surface. The line beneath. It's what kept everything bound." Clara felt it before she saw it, something in her chest unraveling. The spiral wasn't just in the tunnel. It had always been in them, in the land, in the memory, and now it was trying to hold on. The forest around them trembled. Trees bowed toward the center of the valley. Old stones shifted in place, revealing iron shards embedded deep in the soil. "We need to get to the ridge," Ezekiel said. "That's where it started. That's where it has to end." They ran, feet slipping on damp leaves and roots split open by the growing quake. Behind them, the sky darkened unnaturally, a storm gathering from nothing, swirling over the woods like a great black eye. As they reached the ridge, the final spiral came into view, once carved in stone, now glowing with molten red veins, pulsing like a wound. And standing before it was a figure, not the conductor, Martha. She stood in the center of the spiral, her dress black as soot, her eyes alight with fire. But it wasn't her as the town remembered her. It was her as the line remembered her, transformed, twisted by years of power and pact. "You broke my seal," she said. Her voice was layered like dozens of echoes rising from beneath the ground. Clara stepped forward, trembling but unflinching. "You made a deal that wasn't yours to make." "I built a future," Martha hissed. "I kept this place from rotting like the others. I gave it life. I gave it purpose." "You fed it lives," Clara said. "You took every future you claimed to protect." The wind howled around them, pulling at their clothes, lifting dust and leaves like ash from a fire. The spiral flared. "Without the pact," Martha said, "this town dies. It collapses in on itself. The world forgets it." Clara held up Jonah's old ticket. The word cancelled still scorched across it. "Then let it be forgotten," she said. "Let it rest." Martha's eyes narrowed. "You carry my blood. I carry what you left behind, and I'm ending it." Clara stepped into the spiral. Her feet burned, her vision blurred. She pulled the last artifact from her coat, the broken pendant fused with a shard of iron from the altar. It pulsed in her palm. "This is the key," she said. "The first link, the final anchor." Martha reached out, fury rising, but Clara crushed the shard beneath her heel. The world stopped, and then everything shattered. The spiral cracked down the center, spilling light. A wind like no other ripped through the valley. The trees screamed. The ridge split open. From deep underground came a single deafening snap, the last rail snapping. Martha screamed with it, her form dissolving into sparks, her voice scattering into the wind. The spiral dimmed. The quake stopped. Silence returned. Clara collapsed to her knees, eyes wide, lungs burning. Jonah caught her. "How did it?" Ezekiel stepped forward, eyes misted. "She's gone." Clara looked out across the hollow. No more spirals, no more whistles, just land, just air, just sky. For the first time in a century, the track had truly ended. In the weeks that followed, Dorsey Hollow changed in ways too subtle for the outside world to notice, but deeply felt by those who remained. The fog never returned. The tracks that once pulsed faintly with unseen power turned brittle and broke under the first true frost. The old station collapsed in on itself, leaving behind only rotted timbers and rusted iron. No one rebuilt it. And the town, slowly, awkwardly, began to remember. People who had never spoken of the missing began to speak. Families, long silent, started asking questions. Names once scratched from memory returned in full. May Fletcher, Harold Crane, Jonah Whitmore, and many others. They gathered near the ridge where the spiral had once burned, now just a bare ring of stone and dirt, overgrown with weeds. Clara stood at the center, not to lead but to listen. Jonah walked beside her, his voice stronger each day. He didn't remember everything, but what he did he shared. Quietly, honestly, like someone returning from a war that no one else saw. Ezekiel stayed in town for a time, repairing books, reopening his shop, guiding those who wanted to understand the truth. Some couldn't face it. Others still clung to the old belief that forgetting was safer. But the Hollow had already changed. It had no choice. One morning, Clara opened the mailbox and found a single letter with no stamp. She opened it, her hands steady. To those who break the wheel, the track is gone, but echoes remain. Guard your stories. Speak their names. The Hollow sleeps. But sleep is not the same as silence. No signature, just a final spiral, hand-drawn, faded as if from an old dream. She kept the letter. She walked the town with a new gaze, not as someone waiting to be taken, but as someone who had returned from the edge and come back whole. She stopped at the school and scratched a name into a desk that had been sanded too smooth. Jonah Whitmore. She left it there for someone else to find, and she wrote. Every evening she filled her notebook with what she had seen, what she had felt, what had been buried for too long. She wrote down the names. The ledger may have burned, but memory would now live in paper, in ink, in truth. In time, people asked her to speak. She didn't tell them everything. Some truths were too sharp to carry all at once, but she gave them enough to start. They listened. They remembered. And as the sun rose on the first anniversary of the pact's breaking, Clara sat on her porch, looking out over a valley that finally felt hers. Jonah joined her, coffee in hand. Think they'll ever believe us? The rest of the world? Doesn't matter, she said. We believe, that's enough. He nodded. They watched the horizon. No whistle, no smoke. Only wind and birds and the hum of a town rediscovering itself. And with that, our story ends. But before you go, if you found yourself lost in the shadows of Dorsey Hollow, drawn by its whispers and echoes, then subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories waiting, beneath towns, inside letters, buried in forgotten tracks. And don't forget, click on the video appearing on screen right now to continue this journey through the strange, the haunted, and the remembered. Until then, keep your eyes open. Some paths are hidden, but some doors never truly close.